36 years of basketball knowledge and life skills. Your host, Coach Goins, focuses on today's topics on and off the court, helping players and coaches achieve their goals. So get ready for another fast break episode of Basketball More Than a Game with your host, Coach Goins.
Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another fast break edition of Basketball More Than a Game, and I'm your host, Coach Goins. As we always say, make sure you got them laced up tight because today we're going to bringing you another dynamic conversation with none other than Mr. Joe Sherrill, who is from originally North Carolina, but he is living here in the beautiful state of Virginia. But before we turn it over and welcome Coach Sherrill to the podcast, of course, we just want to mention our sponsor. We certainly appreciate Mr. Curtis Jackson, independent insurance agent out of North Carolina. So for you folks that listen in North Carolina, if you need any insurance needs, please reach out to Curtis Jackson, area code 919-614-5796. So, Coach, what's going on? I'm going to tell you. Also, we just got picked up by SoundCloud, so we're so excited about that. So we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Podbean.com. So without further ado, just like I said, I have a dynamic gentleman I've had the opportunity to know for about 12 years in several capacities, and we'll get into that here in a moment. But Coach Sherrill, welcome to Basketball More Than a Game.
Glad to be here, Lamont.
Excellent, excellent. So, folks, what we're going to ask you to do, as we always do, kind of just lean, listen, and learn. And again, you're going to have a golden opportunity because the gentleman that we've got on the Sunday conversation is a little bit different. He does more than just coach, and I know that firsthand. So, with that being said, we'll just kind of give you a little bit of background. Like I said, I've known Coach Sherrill for about 12 years, and in that 12 years capacity, he is also my associate pastor, and he's an associate pastor at Victory Worship Center in Stanton, Virginia. Actually, that's where we're actually sitting here live doing the show today. So, again, we certainly appreciate him taking out time. So, with that, Coach Sherrill, we're just going to jump right into this thing. And with the first couple questions, we entitle it Fast Break. So, and I know you know about that. And, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about what he did when he was in that high school role. But in that, as a former high school star, which I know you were, what did you say, or when did you realize that you could play at the next level?
Well, for me, it was more football as far as playing at the next level.
Okay.
I enjoyed playing basketball, and I was good at basketball, but I knew that football was my first game just because of my ability to throw the ball, and I played quarterback. And I think for me, going into my senior year, you're kind of looking at schools, and you don't really know how you stack up and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know whether I wanted to try to go in and play at the next level. And I can remember one day it just dropped in my heart. I said, I would rather try and not make it than to wonder the rest of my life, could I have done it? And so I thought, if I go and I can't do it, then at least I'll know. And so I just decided to go for it and try to make it. I always felt like if I had wanted to play college basketball that I think I could have, but I felt like football was my first sport.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And just like we said in the title of the podcast, Basketball More Than a Game. And again, we're just not exclusively talking to basketball, even though we're going to talk a little bit about basketball because we can't have the show without talking a little bit about the hoops. But no, just to get a little background. Again, just as I said earlier, I had the opportunity to meet Coach Sherrill about 12 years ago when I moved to Virginia and started attending Victory Worship Center. But he and I have traveled extensively with the ministry, as well as checking out some games. I mean, we've been to some stellar ball games in our 12 years, all the way from chasing those Blue Devils down to Virginia Tech, and an opportunity I think 2 years ago to make a trip to Kentucky to see his nephew, who's an outstanding player. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. As we move along. So, since we're talking football, so what do you, if you don't mind telling our listeners, your biggest transition from the high school gridiron to the college field?
I think they always say that the game is faster, mm-hmm. and that's true. Being a quarterback for me, the speed of the defense was noticeably different, but the learning curve was so great in college. I think by the time we had our first inter-squad scrimmage when I was a freshman, I was so lost that, when they called a pass play, I just hoped to God that I knew where one guy was going so that I could throw the ball to somebody. There was so much with the terminology, and there was so much going on, and it was a really difficult transition for me coming in as a freshman. You have those doubts. I mean, you see these guys running around out there, and they're bigger than you, and they're faster than you, and you go from being one of the best players in your school to now there's a whole bunch of those best players running around on the field, and finding that confidence in yourself and just being comfortable in your own skin and your own abilities. It's easy to fall into that doubt when you see all the other great athletes there.
I can only imagine. So, folks, as we challenge you to make sure that you're leaning, you're listening, and then you're learning what Coach Sherrill is framing out. And again, it's confidence in yourself, because number one, he was recruited. I went there to play, and then be able to realize that, you know what, I'm a big fish coming into a bigger pond, and now I've got to realize that, I got to take my lumps. But again, he laid it out there, precept after precept, and we certainly appreciate him sharing that. So I've got two more questions in this first session of Fast Break. What would you classify as your greatest high school moment? And the second part, what would you classify as your greatest college moment?
Wow. For me, I've always been real team-oriented. Okay. And I think for me, I've told this to my kids, the most fun that I ever had in high school was my senior season of basketball.
Okay.
My junior year, we won 5 games.
Wow.
And that was a long season.
I can only imagine.
And we had a lot of turmoil. We had literal fist fights in practice, where words were exchanged and guys went at it.
Wow.
And just throwing down, as they say. And it was a rough year. And the next year, my senior year, we had a group of guys that we had been together since the 8th grade, really, coming up through. And we could put 5 seniors on the floor at one time. And all of us knew each other. Mm-hmm. We liked each other. There were actually guys on the bench that had come up through us. We had played at the Y together. And so we really meshed and gelled. Everybody knew their role. I was sitting at my son's basketball camp this past week and talking about it a little bit. And as we were watching a team play, okay, and you could tell that there was little power struggles going on, mm-hmm, because certain kids didn't want to pass the ball to this other kid because they felt like he was going to shoot and things like that. And I was telling about my high school team, and on my team, I could shoot and other guys could shoot, but we all knew the ball needed to go to Jeff Witt because that dude was a player. Nope. And so we learned our roles, but to me that was fun. And so we went from my junior year, we won 5 games, mm-hmm, to my senior year, we won 18, wow, and lost 5, and wow, we made it to the playoffs. And so for us, none of us could remember anybody from our high school making the playoffs in basketball. It was a different world back then too. Sure. You didn't have as many teams going, and I think there were 2. We had a 10-team district, and only 2 teams made it. And so Gretna was the regular season champion, okay, and we were the tournament champion. Okay. And we beat Gretna, who was ranked in the top 10 in the state. We beat them 2 out of 3 times that year. Wow. And beat them in their home gym and beat them in the tournament championship. What a difference a year makes. And so it was that was a lot of fun as far as a high school moment. Okay. Now, college moment? My favorite college moment would probably be my sophomore year. I played football at Emory Henry. And my sophomore year, we made it to the national semifinals. And, we didn't get to go home for Thanksgiving because we were there practicing football. And, it was a lot of time. Sure. It was a lot of commitment. But we were so excited because we had the opportunity. We were looking, wondering what that ring might look like on our finger. That's exactly right. Size it up. Go ahead. And it was exciting. And my daughter sent me a text today. She's actually at basketball camp at Emory and Henry, and she was walking down the hall, and she sent me a picture from this huge poster that they have on the wall of the gymnasium there, and it's the team that I played on that went to the national semifinals, and she took a picture of me in the team photo and circled my face.
How about that? How about that?
And I sent her a text back and said, "That's a handsome-looking dude, isn't it?"
But let's kind of frame that out. Think about it. I mean, fast forward years down the road, and there's, as you said, Coach Sherrill's daughter Leah walking down the hall and look, and I can only imagine walking back in the alma mater of a parent, a loved one, to be able to see somebody, to be able to go, wow. And again, I mean, just think about not just from Coach Sherrill's and his viewpoint, but as well as his daughters, be able to walk in and see that and share that moment together. So what a great thing to happen as we approach Father's Day. So again, we appreciate you sharing that moment. So now let's kind of go into a little pick and pop mode here. And again, what we're doing here, we just we call it that because we're going to look for the pick and then we're going to look for the pop. So what we're asking here is, now that his playing days are over, folks, he's never walked away from the court, and he never walked away really from the field. He's spent tireless time and efforts constantly giving back to the community, as well as his church family, but in that just dynamic, what he does on the floor as well as away from the game of basketball and football. So with that being said, Coach, just talk a little bit about, I know you did a travel team for AC Sports the last couple of years. Just, if you don't mind sharing what you loved about that, what was challenging about, coaching, younger kids. So if you don't mind sharing.
Well, I've actually done a lot with younger kids over the last 10 years. I left high school coaching in 1994. I was teaching high school and coaching football and basketball at Sun Valley High School right outside of Charlotte. And when I left that, I went to, I knew I was called to the ministry, and I went away to Bible school. And I thought I was done with coaching for my life at that point. And little did I know that I would do much more coaching after than I ever did before. In the last 10 years, I recently wrote it all up, so just you lose track over time. And in the past 10 years, I have coached 43 youth sports teams. 43. I've coached 23 consecutive seasons, if you count fall, winter, and spring as your 3 seasons to the year. I've coached 23 consecutive seasons. And so I've done a lot with kids over that time. The last 2 basketball seasons, I've coached travel basketball for AC Sports. One was a 7th grade boys team, and one was a 7th grade girls team. Anybody who's ever coached boys and girls can tell you they are very different.
Watch out.
When you're coaching boys and girls. For me, what I wanted to do was I wanted to give kids the opportunity to get a little bit more prepared for JVs. In the area in which we live, kids can try out for JVs in the 8th grade. There's not a middle school program. And so it's difficult for them because they come out of 7th grade, now all of a sudden they're standing there with 9th and 10th graders trying out for JVs. And so I wanted to take that opportunity to give them a little more development, give them more challenge, and the opportunity to grow and be better prepared. So that's to me, I don't know how much you want me to talk about AC Sports.
No. I mean, and then that, folks, just frame that out. I mean, so for you parents that are listening and you coaches are listening, you got questions, tap into the resource. None of us are smart as all of us, and that's why, we try to come into your homes weekly and provide insight. And again, and that's just a click of a button. To be able to listen to Coach Sherrill and anybody else that we've had on, just to find that little inside track and go, hey, you know what, that's a resource. I can reach out and contact these guys and when I have those questions. So here you go. I'm going to go ahead and load this one up on Pick and Pop as relates to, coming off of, again, going back to your playing days. You're the quarterback. I know how our quarterback was. I remember the Greg Peel. You're a quarterback in high school on the high school football team. You're the man. Let's just call it what it is. So in that, and as you tell us a little bit and share with the listening folks, what's it like being recruited? I've never experienced that. So what is that? The letters are coming in. You got to make road trips. You got to go. I got to make decisions. Mom and dad's at the table. Share that with us if you don't mind.
Well, it was a different world when I was recruited. Now so much is done they can do stuff through social media. There's a lot more resources. Back in my day when I was getting recruited, a lot of it was done by letter. I received letters from schools, and I kept a drawer full, a dresser drawer full of letters that I received. And I was proud of the fact that I got those letters, and in the bigger schools that would call. Back in those days, you get phone call on your home phone.
Oh yeah.
Or you got a letter in the mail. For me, when it came time, you had so many visits that you could take, and I took visits to several different places. I took one of my visits to Appalachian State. I took one to East Tennessee State. I took one to Liberty University, and then my last trip was to Emory Henry.
Okay.
And now I can remember when I was in high school, and I'm sitting in class one day at school, and the football coach came in my class and brought me out of class and said, "There's a coach here that stopped in and wants to talk to you." And it was a coach from, when I went to Emory Henry, it was a coach from one of our rival schools.
Okay.
But anyway, and he took my best wide receiver, Clark Grant, and took our linebacker, who was all district. Both of those guys were all district too, and Lawrence Williams was his name. And so the three of us sat down in the guidance counselor's office. Coach comes in and he starts talking, and he's telling us about his school, and he says, if you come to such and such school, you have an opportunity to impact things right away. If you do well, you could see playing time as a freshman, and goes on and on and all this kind of stuff. So, life goes on after that visit.
Right.
The very next week, the coach from Emory Henry, his name was Lou Wacker.
Okay.
And he came, my football coach came and got the same three guys out of class.
All right.
We sit down in the same office where we were a week before, and Coach Wacker comes in, and he starts talking, and he says, more or less, now, it was almost like he was a fly on the wall when we had the conversation a week before.
Okay.
Because out of his mouth, he says, "Now, if you come to Emory Henry, I can't promise you that you're going to play as a freshman, because quite honestly, most freshmen that come into our program don't get the opportunity to play a whole lot. But I will say this, if a coach comes in and tells you that you're going to get to see substantial playing time as a freshman, you just have to ask yourself, what kind of program am I getting into?"
Wow.
And so, to me, I went,
moment.
There's a lot of truth there. And, I took a visit to Emory Henry, and I liked the campus. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a small town. The small town atmosphere appealed to me. I just knew that was the place for me. I liked the setup of the school. I liked the small classrooms. A lot of people have questions about, like, what is Division III like? Right. They think almost like that it's like glorified high school, and they don't have a concept. All they know is what Alabama or Auburn or Virginia Tech looks like. And, I've often told people, when you're talking about football in particular, when you go somewhere like a Division III school, you actually, in a lot of ways, have really good football players. Because when you're at a Division III school, you have guys who want to go there to play football.
Right.
And what you have is guys that are maybe just a little too short, or maybe they're a step too slow, or maybe they just don't weigh quite enough. And so, you might have a guy who's a linebacker who's only 5'9".
Okay.
And he's not going to get recruited by Virginia Tech or Virginia because he's only 5'9".
Right.
But you've got a 5'9" guy that can play football.
Correct.
And so that's the kind of guys that we had. We had a 6'1" quarterback my first 2 years, who was first team parade All-American, and was one of the best football players I've ever seen in my life. But if he was 6'5", he'd have been playing somewhere else. But it's just, to me, I don't regret it at all.
Right.
I enjoyed playing. There were certainly things that I didn't enjoy.
Right. Sure.
But I never looked at it as a step down.
Right.
I went and I visited Appalachian State. I told this story to somebody recently. I'm at Appalachian State. They've got a whole room full of recruits when I'm there. I mean, all these guys running around and coaches are in there, and then we go down on the sideline, and I'm standing on the sideline at the game, and I'm standing there looking around, and there's these 300-pound guys running around as fast as I am, hitting people and stuff, and I'm like, good, googly moogly. I felt like Grady. And I mean, it was an eye-opening experience to me. And, I don't know, it just didn't fit. To me, I was looking for the right fit.
Sure.
And so I think that's important. And when I was at Emory Henry, we had guys that went to Division I schools and then transferred out and came to us because it just didn't fit.
Right. So again, and folks, so don't get hung up on, and we've had this from an earlier guest this year, and don't get hung up on because it's D1, D2. No, you need to go where number one, you're gonna get the education. Number two, where you can play, and then have the reality set in to be able to go and say, you know what, I like it here, and because just as Coach framed it, I don't care if you go to Duke or Carolina, guys transfer in and out of those places every single year. So it's not about that. It's about making sure it's the right fit for you. So with that, we're gonna give Coach Sherrill an opportunity to catch his break before we jump into the second half. So if you are looking for a great place for youth sports, go to playactsports.com for your recreation sports needs, and I guarantee you, in the local area, you will be very excited about what you see. So again, that's playactsports.com for your recreational sports needs. All right, Coach, we're going to switch a little bit and kind of get into the second half. We're going to really focus in on a little bit of the defense, and it's called In Your Face. So with this, in this session, I want to talk a little bit about leadership. When did somebody recognize the leader in you?
I think other people probably saw it in me before I saw it in myself.
Okay.
One of the things, a lot of times people equate being a leader, particularly in sports, as being someone who has to run their mouth and talk all the time. I was never a vocal player in any sport. I've always said I can't even shoot and talk at the same time.
Okay.
When on the basketball court, I was not a trash talker because I can't. I'm more of a thinker and an introvert. I don't express those emotions outwardly necessarily when I play. But I think I always had that leadership quality in me as an athlete. If we're walking around the hallway of the school, I might not say anything to some of these guys, but when we walked in the huddle, if you're talking in my huddle, I'm going to make you shut up.
Right.
And because when I step in there, it's my huddle.
Yes. And
you listen to me. And, I think for me early on, I learned the things that motivated people. And if we're in a football game and we walk in the huddle and the coach calls a trap, and you're the guard, and I know you've got the biggest block that's going on, I'm going to look you right in the eye and say, hey, this is your play right here. Yeah. Make this block, and it'll go for a gain.
Right.
And, if you're on the basketball court, a lot of it is about roles. And, maybe I've got this guy who's playing with me, and I can, I know he needs to rebound. He might not can throw the ball in the ocean standing in a boat, but I know he can rebound. And so I'm going to encourage the things that I want to see him do.
Right.
And so I think, to me, I learned those things early on playing to encourage the things that I wanted to see happen. Okay. I was not one to ride somebody when they did wrong, but I want to encourage the things that I want to see more of.
Okay. Now, I know each of us, we deal with this. We have our strengths and our weaknesses. So in that, on that same vein, if you don't mind sharing, what would you classify as your greatest strength? And it doesn't have to be coaching. So I'm just, the mic is yours.
Wow. What would I classify as my greatest strength? I guess right now the easiest way for me to go would probably be in the realm of coaching. As a coach, I tend to be very organized and detail-oriented. I like to have a plan. If I'm going into a practice or going into a game, I would rather have a plan and deviate from it than walk in and fly by the seat of my pants.
Yep.
And a lot of that just goes to my personality. You know, when I'm there, well, first of all, I like to make the decisions that you know. I'm as I say, I've coached a lot of youth, and so I want to make an evaluation on what I think is best for my team.
Okay.
And so to me, the first thing I want to do is make an evaluation of what is my purpose. And so I think for youth sports, that is extremely important as a coach, is to decide what is your purpose. Why do you have this team? Because we tend to be very competitive people because we've been in sports and we've coached. And you get in that situation, it's very easy for that competitiveness to take over. So while I'm sitting down outside of the realm of the competition, I can make decisions based on what is best for the learning and development of my players as it relates to my purpose for that team. And so then I don't get in the middle of the game and my competitive nature pushes aside what's best.
Right.
And so, you know, for me, with younger kids, to me, the most important thing is not always winning.
Right.
The most important thing is the development of the player as it relates to the fundamental skills of the game and the development of them as a person. And so I want to fashion my practices and how I conduct myself and how we even substitute and rotate in a game so that those things reinforce what we're trying to accomplish. And so to me, I have to do that when I'm removed from the competition and make a plan. And it helps me to put the best interest of every kid first. And it just depends on what your purpose is as a team. Now, when I was coaching in high school, it's different when you're coaching varsity boys basketball than when you're coaching 7 and 8 year olds in basketball.
Right.
My ultimate goal with 7 and 8 year olds is not to win every game.
Right.
That's not my first most important thing. And as a youth coach, I have told people many times that I want to treat kids the way that I would want someone else to treat my kid. Notice I didn't say I want to treat them the way that I treat my kids.
Correct.
Because I have a relationship with my kid, and you have a relationship with your kid. So you may treat your kid in a certain way because of that relationship, but you don't have a relationship with this other kid over there. So if you treat them the way you treat your kid, it's not going to come across the same way because the relationship's not the same. So I say, treat that kid the way I would want someone to treat my kid. And I think, with the respect and, you can push someone as a young athlete, but they still maintain that respect for you, and you maintain that respect for them and how you treat them, how you speak to them. And, I've read this. There's a book that the Fellowship of Christian Athletes uses a lot called 3D Coaching.
Okay. Yep.
And I know you're familiar with that. And it talks about dealing with the heart behind the jersey first, and realizing that there's a person inside of that jersey. And as a coach, many times it's easy for us to just look at the exterior and what they can do. But, you think about it as a person. Anytime somebody just treats you, if your employer, if they just look at you as what you can do and what you can accomplish, that over time, that wears thin on you.
Yes.
And so you want to know that your employer cares about you as a person. And as an athlete, athletes want to know that you care about them as a person. And the old saying holds true that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if people know that you care about them, if kids know that you care about them, then your correction and your discipline comes across differently. And if parents know that you care about their kid, they can deal with that correction differently. But if they don't know that you care about their kid, then it's easy for that to come across as you're just being mean and being a jerk. And so I think that dealing with the person, now for me as a coach, it's about more than just the sport. You know, I have taken kids on my team before just because I thought I could help them as a person.
Right.
And that's just a part of how I'm wired and who I am as a person. You know, I like to see kids that I feel like I can impact.
Sure.
And so that's very important to me.
Oh, yeah. So, folks, Coach Joe Sherrill, and you're asking why he's on basketball more in the game, because that was true in your face. He just laid it out as I sat here, and he just was, and it was almost like he was in the operating room. And for all of you coaches, you parents that listen, listen what he says. Relationship before the task. There's a heart behind the jersey. And so, again, we just can't thank him enough for just, allowing us to dip into that section of In Your Face and what that's all about. So as we transition into the last phase of the podcast, we just want to make sure that you understand that we are available on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as SoundCloud and Podbean.com. So we are so excited as we continue to move forward, not only with today's Sunday conversation, as we call it, but again, we just thank everybody. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. And we certainly appreciate everything that has been coming down the pipe so far. So as we turn into the last session, as we call In the Paint, that's where we're going to find out who's sitting across the mic from me. I know him, but you guys don't know him. And in that, I know he has a heart after God because, again, he is the associate pastor of Victory Worship Center. If you don't know about anything about Victory Worship Center here in Stanton, Virginia, you need to find out what's going on, as I say, up on the hill. Because it is just absolutely dynamic. I said I've been here 12 years and just been able to be a part and just come in and just to be able to develop myself personally as well as spiritually, and just being led by Pastor Joe Sherrill as well as Pastor Ray Epper. But in that, let's kind of talk a little bit about how do you balance? I mean, you listen, folks. He's already told us he's had 43 teams that he's coached over there. So let's talk a little bit about work-life balance. You do that. I know you're fresh off the road with your son, and those went down to UVA Wise. But share with basically from a coaching standpoint. If you can share with our coaches that are subscribers, how does Pastor Joe handle Pastor Joe as well as Coach Joe and he's a husband and he's a father. So let's talk. How do you deal with all of that?
Well, it's not easy. There's a lot going on. I made the choice a number of years ago that I wanted to be involved with my kids. Mm-hmm. My dad, I guess I will go back and credit him largely. When I was growing up, my dad was a Baptist pastor, and so he had flexibility in his schedule. And most of my football practices, he attended. And now he wasn't sitting right there on the sideline. He was off at a distance with some other dads, and they were probably 100, 150 yards away, but where they could watch what was going on. Mm-hmm. He was at every sporting event that I had in high school. I think he and my mom missed one game when I was in college, and that was a game that was a long trip away, and they couldn't make it to that. And so, Mom and Dad supported me in everything that I did, and they were there for me, and I wanted to be like that for my kids. I think seeing it modeled for me. And so, my wife and I may not be involved in a whole lot of other things, but we want to be involved with our kids and involved in the sports that they do. I said earlier that I thought I was done with coaching when I left high school. I just, sometimes you don't realize the things that God puts on the inside of you and how those things are going to come out over time. And I think that I had that coach's heart, and I feel like that God has given me an ability to teach kids. I taught high school. Right. And I was a PE teacher, and you learn how to break a skill down and how to explain it in a way that kids can understand it. And I thought that maybe I missed it, because I went into teaching and maybe I wasn't listening to what God had for my life. I believe now that it was all a part of the plan in how I got to where I am, because I use all of the skills that I learned as a teacher and as a coach. I've used those through the years. As a father, and as a husband, you have to prioritize things, and you have to make sure that you spend the time. It's an easy thing to do when you're coaching. There's two sides of the ditch. Mm-hmm. There's the ditch where, we've all seen the coaches that they coach their kids. Correct. And the other kids just happen to be there.
Right.
And it's also easy to get so focused on coaching the team that you forget about your kid. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I balance that is, when I'm there, I try to coach the team, and just like any other parent, I would try to spend time outside. If I noticed that my kid was struggling with a certain thing when we were in practice, we would go home and we would hit the field ourselves and work on stuff. It's always important to maintain the relationship at home. I read something actually today. Okay. And the phrase that it said, it was from a book called Love and Respect by Emerson Edgerich. I think I said his name right. And in it, he was basically saying, I come third. It's what God wants first. It's what my spouse wants second, and then I come third. And I think that goes a long way towards it. I need to be obedient to what God tells me to do and live the way that I feel like that God wants me to live my life. But I also I can't just forget about my spouse and my family. I have to keep those things in mind. And, as a dad, I think here we are. This coming Sunday will be Father's Day. Yes. As far as us taping, I don't know when this is going to air. But, Father's Day is quickly coming on us. And as dads, we can be, I think it's hardwired into us to sacrifice for our family. And I think us dads, we're more than willing to sacrifice our time and put in that extra effort if it'll benefit our wives and our kids. And so for me, it comes about those things. I want to follow after God. I want to be attentive to my family, to my spouse. And then, the other thing comes third, the sport. And there's always times where you have to balance things out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, you may be in a season where things happen a certain way. Mm-hmm. But it needs to be a season and not an all the time. For a season, I can dedicate more time to this. But as a whole, I need to keep that balance with my family.
So, again, we certainly appreciate him, stopping and peeling back and allowing us to see exactly what's made him successful. So, again, coaches, again, we challenge you to take what you've heard and apply it where you can apply it to help you continue what the Lord has assigned for you to do, as well as not just sports wise. Again, as Coach just framed it out, just to be the well balanced person that you can. So as we continue to find out who Coach Sherrill is, I know who he is, but we're gonna talk a little bit about his favorite basketball team, the University of North Carolina Tar Heels. I know they were victorious, and he's also a Dallas Cowboy fan. So I got a couple of questions I want to toss at him in reference to that. So with that first question, what is your greatest Tar Heel moment?
Wow. I don't know that I can narrow it down to a one.
Okay,
I can give a couple.
All right, give me a couple. That's fine.
I can remember watching the game in 1982 when Michael Jordan hit the 17-foot jump shot to win the national championship.
Okay, I remember that well.
I remember watching the game when Carolina beat Michigan.
Okay.
To win the national championship. Those are ones that stick out to me, but I can even remember all the way back to, Walter Davis making the half-court shot, bank shot in. You know,
He's dating himself, ladies and gentlemen.
I was a small child then. You know, for me, I remember when Carolina had recruited Michael Jordan.
Well, okay.
And you know, back in the day, every year you got the ACC handbook.
Okay.
And in the ACC handbook, it would line out all the returning players and, you know, talk about what was happening in the upcoming season. And then in the last part of the section on the team, it would talk about their incoming freshmen. And I can remember reading a little article, just a little segment on Michael Jordan, and it talking about him. And they actually compared him to David Thompson in that little thing that they read there. And then he came in as a freshman, and one of the first things I remember him doing was he would do fundamental things, like if he was on, like taking a 12-foot shot from the wing, he would bank it in. You know, he would use the backboard, and he would do the fundamental things. But when I read that article and I saw those things about him, I said, you know, this guy's going to be my favorite player. And I knew it from before he ever played a game at Carolina. I'm like, I'm going to like this guy.
Because fundamentally, he worked on it. He worked on his game.
Well, I knew who David Thompson was. And when they compared him to David Thompson, I thought, this guy's going to be good.
How about that? So fast forward years later. So I got to ask you this question. How did you become a Carolina fan? I mean, just what made you go, okay, I'm here. I'm not going any further.
Wow. You know, growing up, I really liked, this is going to sound strange to anybody from the state of North Carolina, but I really liked NC State and Carolina a lot. But, I mean, back in the days when David Thompson was at NC State, you know, I was a little boy, and I was 6 and 7 years old, and he was my favorite player. I actually had the opportunity to meet him and get an autograph from him a number of years ago. But, you know, I liked Carolina as well. I liked Dean Smith and how he coached. But for me, I guess the first time that I really pulled hard for Carolina was in the 81 championship game when they lost to Indiana.
Wow. Oh,
yeah. Al Wood and Jimmy Black and those guys, you know, I remember watching that game.
Yes.
And that was one of the first championship games that I really watched and got into when I was a young kid. And so for me, I think that was a big turning point, was watching that championship game. The next year, Michael Jordan came in, and, you know, I could remember, I remember those guys coming in, James Worthy, Sam Perkins, Michael Jordan, and every year you see all those guys coming in, and, you know, I liked the way they played. I liked the colors.
Oh, yeah. But you think about it, you know, and that's what's missing, and that's another show, another dime. But I tell you what, when Coach Sherrill was dropping down, I mean, you know, Worthy, Perkins, and then when he's talking about even that national championship, I can remember they opened up the Sports Illustrated and they had Isaiah Thomas going in for a layup, and I think it was, and the child should lead them.
That's
but
right.
I know Al Wood had a monster game, and it was. I mean, I just thought for sure. I remember those blue Converse that they were wearing back then. So he helped Coach kind of dust it back as he was dropping those names. So for you young guys that don't know who those guys were, that's why it's called YouTube. Make sure you pull it up and check it out. All right, so we told you that he was a Cowboys fan, so we're gonna set the table up for the same way. And I know the jersey that he wears, but I'm not gonna leak that out, and I'll let him have that opportunity to talk about the fellas from down in Texas, because he is a big-time Cowboy fan. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So go ahead and give us your couple favorite Dallas Cowboy fan moments, if you don't mind sharing it.
Oh, you know, for me, I can remember the first Super Bowl that I ever remember watching, and I'm sure you probably enjoyed this one, was when the Cowboys lost to the Steelers.
1978.
No.
Oh, 76.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That first one.
Okay.
And, you know, and I think that started my dislike of the Steelers then. But watching, you know, when Tony Dorsett came out as a rookie, and the Cowboys ended up with him. And then that year when he was a rookie and they won the Super Bowl.
Okay.
And they beat the Broncos, I believe it was, in the Super Bowl. And that was, you know, for me, I mean, I'm when you're a kid and your team wins the Super Bowl, it just don't get any better than that.
No, sir. No, sir.
And so that was a big one for me. I enjoyed that thoroughly. That, and after all the years through the late 80s and everything, when the Cowboys were so bad, that Troy Aikman's rookie season, they went 1-15. And, I was teaching high school at Sun Valley, and my roommate and I were both Cowboy fans. And we had two guys that used to come over every Sunday. And my roommate had, I don't even remember what it was called at the time, but where we could watch the Cowboys game every Sunday. And he had a big screen TV before everybody had big screen TVs. Okay. And so the four of us Cowboy fans would watch the Cowboys every week. And I can remember we finished one season, and we were all like, next year we're going to be really good. And so then over the course of a couple seasons, then seeing us go all the way to and win the Super Bowl in those 90s teams with Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin. And that was a lot of fun, too.
I can imagine. Was it back-to-back, 92, 93, if I'm not my mistake? But anyway, it is, Coach, I'm a huge Steeler fan. But, one thing about being a Steeler fan and also sitting across from the Cowboys here, and as we do this podcast, you just think back on the great players. I mean, you think, I think about Roger Staubach, and he mentioned Tony Dorsett, and I remember the catch, I think it was Butch Johnson made. He was diving across.
Wouldn't count today.
But, I mean, you go to Billy Joe Dupree, Robert Newhouse, Ron Springs, Everson Walls. I'm not a Cowboys fan, but those guys and the plays that they made as a football fan, you just want to stop and recognize those guys. Again, the game is what it is today because great players like that, I don't care what uniform they're wearing. And again, it's just a tremendous career. And again, as we start winding the things up, first of all, we just want to thank Coach Joe Sherrill for what he continues to do and being led by God, and in everything that he puts his heart and his hands to. Nothing but good stuff and positive stuff comes out. But as again, the show won't air. You hear us mention Father's Day quite often. The show will air early August, but it is Father's Day, and I would definitely like to dedicate this show to Pastor Joe Sherrill's father. And I had an opportunity to meet him several years ago, and he's passed, and with that I know, and there's not, in the 12 years I've known Pastor Joe, there's times that he's always made reference to his dad and his dad supporting him and his family. And again, as we said earlier, had an opportunity to go out and spend time with his sister in Kentucky and her beautiful family. So again, just and it just shows you that he was raised right by God-fearing parents. But in that, certainly appreciate everything that Mr. Sherrill did for his family, because I definitely see it, passed down through his kids, and I experienced that for 12 years of just having, again, not just a relationship. I call Coach Joe Sherrill a true friend. So in that, Coach Sherrill, I'll turn the mic over to you for your closing comments.
Well, you just talked about my dad, and I think I'll close talking about my dad, because Dad passed away this past September. He grew up in a family where his father left home when he was 3 months old. And so he grew up in a family without a dad, and his mom passed away when he was 16. He was in high school, and she died of cancer. And, to see what Dad left behind, I was the last of 5 kids. I have 3 older brothers and an older sister. And they all of my brothers and sister have beautiful families, great kids, and the legacy that Dad left. And, it wasn't that everything was handed to him. He was born the year that the stock market crashed and grew up in the Great Depression and was in the Air Force and the Korean War started. And then he was getting ready to get out of the Air Force, and he got sent to Vietnam. And, things weren't easy for him.
Right.
But he made choices on what he felt like was right. And he was a very principled person and very, I will say, determined in pursuing the things that he felt like was right. And I think that he passed those things along to his family. And, and I see the legacy of who my father was in my kids. And I believe that's something that will live on for generations to come. And I'm thankful for him, just one man who was willing to take a stand for the things that he felt like was right and raise a family the way that he felt like was right. And I see the lasting impressions, and I would challenge any of you out there that, you know, your legacy will live on. And so make the choice to live life principled and by the things that you know are right, because people are always watching and you're always influencing someone. And so the greatest legacy that you can leave behind is impacting future generations.
So again, that's just eloquently put, and that's Coach Joe Sherrill. And so again, don't ask me again why he's on the show. Just sit back and enjoy everything that he's laid out in front of us today. So again, as we start to wrap up, it has been an honor and privilege to have you on the show, and we just wish Godspeed as you continue to move forward and what he has done for you. So don't forget to check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Podbean.com. And always remember, as I start to close the show, somebody somewhere is working on the game, and our scripture verse is John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the light. And I'm your host, Coach Goins, and I will see you in the gym.